Just when I finished throwing up into the rubbish bin, I started to think rationally and grew worried for Andy. Was what I had seen on the camera just an elaborate prank on the new guy? It seemed way too real. The blood, the screams, the entity itself. I needed to get to the entrance of the mall and see what was happening. Just then, I looked at the cursed rule sheet again and my eyes fell on the very first rule. Do not exit the security room unless it is time for your routine check. I fought an internal battle with myself. The rational part of me told me that it was just all a prank, and the instinctual and primitive part of me told that something was seriously wrong here, and I had to follow the rules for my own safety. The distinct ring of my desk phone interrupted my conflicting thoughts. I picked the phone up.
Hey, listen man, this is Andy. I can see this figure in the distance, dude. Could you check the car park cameras?
I looked up at the car park cameras and saw nothing. Andy, are you okay?
Oh shit, Richard, get out of here.
I heard the low growl and the scream of Andy before the call cut off. I started hyperventilating. Somehow camera 9 showed me the future and Andy was being eaten at the very moment. If this was a prank, it was a sick, disgusting one. This had gone too far. My gut feeling deep down told me to just follow the rules and come out of this mall alive. And so, for once in this entire week, I decided to listen to my gut instinct. I scanned the list of rules again and again until my watch let out a small beep. It was the hourly chime feature on my watch. I quickly realized I needed to do my first round of the mall. It was 12 a.m. I slowly opened the door of the security room, half expecting to get jumped by the same alien that ate Andy. I walked out into the dimly lit mall. The mall felt like a medieval castle at this point, except medieval castles were made of mostly hallways and corridors. Here the mall was just a vast open space. I'll try to give you guys a better description to really help you visualize the mall. Alright, let's start from the entrance. You have an average sized parking lot in the front first. Walk through the parking and you get to the front entrance, which is basically just a big glass double door that can be closed at night. You go inside and you will find yourself in I wouldn't call it a hallway because it's a pretty wide space. Continue walking through the hallway and you get to the main square. The main square is basically a vast area. Shops line the edges of the main square while the middle occupies the big spiral staircase leading up to the second story. There are also old elevators that lead to the second story. The lighting is terrible for a shopping mall and most places are poorly lit. I guess if the shop lights were on the main square would definitely be brighter. Otherwise, the square was drowned in shadows and darkness. It's a darkness in which you can still see, but you may mistake something for another thing. It's the type of darkness that makes you feel like some monster is right behind you. It's the unnerving type of darkness. It's the type of darkness in your closet when you mistake your coat for an unwelcome home intruder. While you can still see the coat in the darkness, that darkness masks it and makes it look like something else. That's the kind of darkness I'm talking about. Climb up the staircase and you get to the second floor. The second floor is an exact replica of the main square along with the same lighting issues. The middle, however, is cut out and you can actually overlook most of the main square along with the entrance if you lean over the edge. My security room is quite discreet. You have to go to the right of the second story and you'll find a discreet door in the corner leading to my security room via another flight of stairs. I can also access the security room from the first floor through the same flight of stairs. The roof of the mall is basically just an open glass canopy. I assumed the mall would look great during the day, but at night it's a creepy place. I hope I haven't confused you too much with the description and you got a somewhat clear picture in your head. Now imagine taking a stroll around this mall at 12 a.m. That's exactly what I was doing. So I walked out of the only place that I deemed safe in the entire mall, the security room. As I stepped out into the barren mall, chills ran up my spine. I crossed my arms and hugged myself, thinking I was just cold. The air was cool and empty here. My eyes slowly adjusted to the new dimly lit conditions and I started walking around the second story first, just staring into each store. I jumped at every shadow and sound. As I walked past one of the stores, I heard a loud crash. It made me jump back as my heart started pounding violently in my chest. My veins were full of adrenaline, and I swear I could have beaten the world's fastest athletes then. I looked directly into the direction of the sound and noticed that some items had just fallen over. I sighed in relief and dismissed the incident when a thought suddenly blossomed in my already panic-stricken mind. Why did the items fall over just as I was near them? Is this just a coincidence? Countless thrillers and horror movies I had watched came up in my mind, and I suddenly thought a serial killer was out there lurking to get me. It was way worse than that. My ears picked up a faint crying sound from the store, and I immediately looked over. A ghostly white tall woman emerged from the rows. I was frozen in fear. She was extremely tall. Her eyes lacked pupils and were a milky white color. She had a round mouth lined with blood-stained razor-sharp teeth. The rest of her face was pale and flawless. She didn't seem to have a nose. Her dirty black hair hung at either side, and she seemed to be wearing some sort of gown. Every single one of my muscles were frozen, and my heart nearly popped out of my chest in each beat. My vision swam. I tried to scream, but my voice caught up in my throat. Every single cell in my body screamed for me to run away, but my muscles were locked. The creepy woman then pulled out a knife from her abdomen and started charging at me. That caused me to snap away quickly. I ran so fast my PE teacher would have shed tears of joy. I felt her breath on my neck, but I didn't dare turn back. I ran into the security room and slammed the door shut. I locked it. Crimson blood oozed out from the gap under the door slowly. I screamed and jumped right back. Suddenly, I heard the regular ring of the desk phone. I picked it up.
Hey, this is the police. We received an emergency call from this location.
Yes, please come, I need help. Then the person on the other line said the following in such a malicious and demonic voice that shivers ran down my spine.
It isn't that easy to get out of here.
Then suddenly my ear felt wet. I pulled the receiver away to see that a thin cold black hand had somehow come out of it. The hand looked like it had been severely burned. It suddenly moved forward and extended further. Its sharp claws clawed at my ear. I lost a bit of my ear and felt an intense stinging pain in the area. I threw the receiver away as my vision blurred with the tears in my eyes. The hand retreated back into the receiver with the bit of my ear it took. Suddenly I heard the high-pitched beep again. I immediately looked up at camera 9 and watched as the screen came back to life. I saw Marcus on the camera, and he looked nervous as ever while patrolling the first floor. I watched as his face suddenly turned to a face of absolute fear. Somehow the camera changed angles, and now I could see what he was looking at. He saw the same white-gowned lady that I had just dealt with, staring at him from the shadows of a store. She stuck out like a sore thumb in the shadows of the shop. Marcus was frozen just like me, and the lady walked over towards him. She pulled out the knife embedded in her abdomen and slowly walked towards him. Marcus became unstuck like me and started running, but suddenly he stopped. The camera angle switched again, and I saw a grinning Dylan holding Marcus as he struggled to run away. Dylan was bigger and leaner than Marcus, and it seemed impossible that he would get away. I felt helpless as I watched the camera. Dylan started laughing. Even though I couldn't hear it, I felt chill go down my spine. He grinned wide from ear to ear, unnaturally wide. His face froze in that grin, and his eyes were wide and hungry. The lady slowly walked up to Marcus and stabbed him again and again. The screams were so loud I could hear them from my security room. I shuddered in my seat and tears started rolling down my face, but I continued watching the camera feed. His screams finally died down and his body slumped down. Dylan let go and his body slid down on the floor like jelly. Dylan then put his fingers on either side of his grin and ripped open his skin. His skin peeled away like tape. I felt the urge to vomit again, but my stomach was empty. My eyes got watery and I grew nauseous. Dylan ripped all his skin off to reveal a totally different creature. He was still a human, just skinned. I could see all his muscles, organs, and veins. He then bent down and started to eat Marcus's body. The lady with the knife smiled and disappeared off screen. The camera finally flickered off. As soon as the camera turned off, I gasped massive gulps of air, realizing that I had held my breath the whole time. I then started crying hysterically and kicking at the walls. I felt hopeless. My mind flooded with thoughts of how I was about to die here. Suddenly, I heard a knock on my door. My mind quickly came back to the situation and I was on alert. "Hey Richard, it's me Dylan. There's this weird thing outside. Please let me in." I gasped and quickly hid in the toilet and locked the door to it. Dylan started knocking again and his voice grew more frantic. I put my hands over my ears and I tried my best to ignore him. He then started kicking and ramming himself into the door. I flinched every time I heard the door bang and prayed for the door to stay strong. Luckily the door held and the bang subsided. I cautiously made my way out of the bathroom and collapsed in the chair. My watch chimed again, telling me that it was 1 a.m. In no way I was going out into the mall after that. I decided to skip the round, just this one. 5 minutes ticked by in absolute silence. I started laughing in relief. That's when the first hand popped out. It slid right out of the wall like the wall was a pool of water. Imagine you pulling your hand out from underwater. That's exactly how it appeared to come out of the wall. I jerked back immediately. More hands appeared from every wall and they reached for me. They were hungry for me. They reached further and further, wanting to grasp my skin. I backed off as more hands appeared from the walls, the roof, and the floor. I screamed as one of them touched me with their slimy wet grip. I ran out of the security room. So not following this rule really had its consequences. I strained my eyes to see in the dark and slowly made my way around the second floor. I decided not to go to the first floor to be safe. I felt very vulnerable in the open space as unknown shadows surrounded me. I felt like every shadow was going to jump at me. Suddenly, I felt a very strong presence behind me. I looked behind and saw nothing but shadows and the faint outline of the mall. I felt the presence again. I turned my whole body quickly and saw nothing once again. My heart rate rose to levels I didn't know were possible and I stood still. I felt a faint breath on the back of my neck and turned around to come face to face with Dylan. I whimpered and jumped backwards. I somehow tripped on myself and fell to the floor. Dylan grinned at me in the same way. His skin was back on again though. He started leaning down to pick me up while laughing. I kicked him in the face and quickly strangled up to my feet. Dylan was still in shock at what had happened. In my adrenaline-filled state, I kicked the Dylans in the groin while simultaneously punching him at the side of the neck. These were some of the moves I had learned from when I used to do mixed martial arts in my teens. Looks like all the practice really did help and my muscle memory was real. I then quickly shoved him backwards against the railing. I quickly pushed him over the railing and he fell to the first floor with a scream. He landed with a thud on the hard marble floor. Blood pooled around his head. He stared up at me with lifeless eyes. My watch then started beeping and I realized I screwed up. My 15 minutes for the round was over. The shadows transformed into silhouettes and soon multiple black figures were surrounding me. They all howled in unison.